Canine Sanctuary. Welcome to our first office hours live chat of 2022. I did a live chat on New Year's Eve 2021 and it went very well. I published a community poll and not everyone, 55% of you voted in that poll that you would like me to do a live office hours about once a month for 30 minutes. And the reason I have to restrict that to 30 minutes is because I do have other clients that pay me to meet with me one-on-one for animal training and animal behavior consultation. And I also teach online classes, and I do a lot of my work in animal training and behavior consulting online. And so I have appointments. For example, I have 2 appointments after I do this live chat. But I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to ask me animal training and behavior questions if you have them, and see what it's like to meet with me in an office hours type setting and ask me your questions. So in today's session, I don't have an assistant. Here at our animal sanctuary, we do accept interns from the Pikes Peak Community College Zookeeping Technology program. And my assistant / husband, Jim, is supervising 2 interns this afternoon. And they're out there working with the horses and putting some reptile enclosures together for me. So I'm having to monitor the chat and answer questions by myself. So we'll see how that goes. And I do want to mention that last time was the first time Jim had helped me with any kind of live stream or online session at all, and he didn't know what the super chats were. So a few of you did super chats last time, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to make sure and thank you for that, because he didn't know what they were and he didn't tell me until after we were finished. So I apologize that you guys that did that didn't get a shout out. But I had a question from Natalia, and we'll just start with that one because she posted it under my community post. And her question was, do I ever have other people do target training with the snakes or other animals, or is it just me? And how do the animals react when someone else is doing the target training? Well, I have tried that. I didn't do it on purpose, but when we were training our super dwarf reticulated python, Tau Ceti, to voluntarily position and hold still for a microchip implant with no restraint, I had been doing his target training sessions from the time he was a baby. And on the day that we started practicing him holding in place for the microchip implant, I had my husband do the targeting because I was going to be the one doing the microchip implant. So I had my husband target TC and position him lengthways rectilinearly on like an exam table and have him hold in place at the target. And I went to his back end because we implant the microchips subcutaneously under the skin in the back left side of the snake. So when I did that, TC turned around to watch me, and he wasn't paying attention to my husband. He wasn't paying attention to the target. He was paying attention to me. And so we had to modify that procedure a little bit. So the animals do tend to get used to one single trainer, and they pay attention to that one trainer. And that is something that taught me. And they do this in zoos. So I'm not sure why I didn't think to do this with the snakes here. But if there's more than one keeper or trainer that's going to be working with an animal and teaching them a behavior and having them perform the behavior, you have to have all of the people involved practice that behavior with the animal. So now what we're doing periodically is having my husband Jim target some of the snakes during their regular feedings so they get used to him as the trainer handler, and it's not always that they're just used to me. So that's a great question, Natalia, and it can make a difference. Now, if you're training the animal remotely where you're positioning a target and there's not a human handler with that target, and you're teaching the animal that when they approach that target, they get reinforced and there's no person that they see, then that's a little bit different. Then they're likely to respond to that target no matter where you place it, and that's called remote training, and that's where the human's out of the equation, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons why you would do that. The way that we do it is we have a trainer directing the animal with the hand signal, the voice command, the target, depending on the species we're working with. And so they do tend to get used to that one handler. Let's see what questions I have. How should I introduce my leopard gecko to a new enclosure? I won't be able to put her old enclosure inside of the new one. That's a great question, and that also applies to snakes or any reptile that you're going to move from one enclosure to another. If the old enclosure won't fit inside the new enclosure, you have a few other options. If your leopard gecko or other reptile is used to coming out and interacting with you, or used to coming out and using exercise spaces, you can use the new enclosure as an exercise space. In other words, you'd bring the leopard gecko out periodically, let it explore the new space, and then still put it back in its old enclosure for a while. So over time, it's getting used to that new space because it's exercising in it, it's exploring in it. And by the time you're ready to put it in there permanently, it's a space that they're already familiar with and they're used to, and probably have scent marked while they've been in there exercising and exploring. Another thing that you can do, if that's not an option, let's say you have your leopard gecko's not friendly, it can't come out for exercise. What you can do is take all of the old furnishings, including the old substrate, and put it in the new enclosure. Don't clean anything. And then move your leopard gecko into the new enclosure with all of their old stuff, with all the old smells and everything on it. And don't clean the substrate or you clean the water bowl, but I wouldn't clean substrate or clean any of the furnishings until after the leopard gecko has gotten used to the new space that all of its old stuff is in. Because reptiles do scent mark, and so the scent of your leopard gecko is going to be in their old substrate. Maybe they've produced urates and feces that are in there. Their old enclosure furnishings are going to smell like them. And so you just want to transfer all of that into the new enclosure and try to set it up in the most identical way that you can to the old enclosure. Presumably the new enclosure is different space-wise or maybe bigger, but try to position things in the same place relative to each other that they were in the old enclosure, and then move your gecko into it. And then once they seem used to it, you can start cleaning and things like that. Do you have lockable casters on the activity station? It seems like that would be easier to move around to each of the snakes. On the activity stations themselves, I do have casters, but I don't believe they lock. So on those cat stands that I have transformed into snake activity stations, the wheels don't lock, but you could, if you wanted to install casters on them that locked, you could certainly do that. I've never had a problem with them moving when I don't want them to move. So the casters are just free wheels that move around. I do have locking caster wheels on the bottoms of all of my enclosures. So all of my snake enclosures are on some type of platform with wheels, and they do have locking casters so that I can lock them in place when they're stationary, and I can unlock the wheels if I need to move those around. I am working on building one now. Would like to know how you constructed yours. I presume those are the activity stations. I'm not that good at building things from scratch. So what I tend to do is I take something that's already built and I repurpose it for a snake activity station. The two tall wooden ones that I have are cat scratching trees or cat stands. I bought one from Catit, C-A-T-I-T, and the other one I don't remember what company I got them from, but I like them because they're mostly wood. They don't have carpet on them like most cat scratching posts do. And then the shelves have a piece of carpet on them, but it's Velcroed on, so you can take that off and then there's just wood underneath. So I just modified those cat trees with perches. I am pretty good at installing perches and screwing things into stations that are already built. So I just add rocks to the levels, I add perching, I add wheels to the bottom so I can move them around, and then I just will set random items on the stations. And then I have a few activity stations that are meant to be tables, like computer stands. I have a standing work desk that's got wheels on the bottom that I use as an activity station. And those types of stations that are meant to be workstations or tables with wheels on the bottom are great because you can put other things on top of it. So I'm able to put bins on top of it. I'm able to put portable like parrot perches on top of it. Or I'm able to turn bar stools upside down with the legs sticking up and put those on top of the tables with wheels. So I just take activity stations. Well, they're not activity stations. I take pieces of furniture, either for cats or for some other purpose, and I just modify them a little bit for use with the snakes. Thank you guys, all of you who are saying that you love the channel and you're glad you found it. I'm glad to be here for you. When I first started training snakes, I really didn't have anywhere to turn. And as an animal trainer already, I just figured stuff out on my own and experimented with the snakes that I had and started working with. I didn't really have anybody to turn to ask questions to. I did find a few zookeepers after I got into this, and I found a few published papers on snake training, but it wasn't easy. So I'm happy to be here and be accessible to all of you who are working with your snakes and other reptiles. In terms of fitting in as much enrichment into an enclosure, would a bioactive, a naturalistic, or a sterile with a digging bin be better? That's completely up to you. It isn't what's in the enclosure, it's if the things you're putting in the enclosure enable the snake to have access to the ability to perform natural behaviors. So you could put a live plant in there with branches that the snake or other reptile can climb on, in order to give them the ability to perform that natural behavior of climbing. Or you could put a wooden bird perch in there, or you could construct a fake tree out of PVC and the snake or other reptile could still climb on it. I recommend that you texture that so that it's not slippery. But the point of the enrichment or just the general furnishings in the enclosure isn't whether it's real natural material from outside or not. It's does that give the snake or other reptile the ability to perform species typical behaviors. So whatever you're putting in there, does it allow them to burrow? Does it allow them to swim? Does it allow them to climb? Whatever behaviors your species would naturally perform in the wild, does whatever's inside your enclosure give them the ability to perform those same behaviors under captive management? If you want to use naturalistic stuff like real rocks, real substrate, real wood, that's all great. If you want to do bioactive, that's all great. But the main important thing is to make sure that your snake or other reptile can perform species typical behaviors. The other thing that you want to think about is they're not in the wild, they're under captive management. And so you can put enrichment items in there to stimulate them to perform novel behaviors. And those are behaviors that they wouldn't necessarily perform in the wild, but because they're under captive management, they don't have to spend 100% of their energy budget on survival and reproduction. They have a little bit of extra energy to burn. And so in addition to giving them opportunities to perform natural species typical behaviors, you can also give them the opportunity to investigate novelty and do new things that they wouldn't necessarily do in the wild. I'm checking the chat here. And I also want to point out that enrichment isn't enrichment once the snake or other animal is used to it. So normal enclosure furnishings that allow the snake to do natural behaviors are great. Those are things you're going to permanently leave in there, like climbing things, ledges, shelves, swimming pools, substrate to burrow in. Enrichment are things that are new to the snake that they're going to interact with. And then once they get used to it, it's not new or novel anymore. And you're going to take that item out and replace it with something else that's new. So normally zoos rotate enrichment items into animal exhibits every few days or so, because once the animal's used to it, it's no longer enrichment. And just remember that enrichment is different than the normal things that you put in the enclosure to provide them the opportunities to perform species typical behaviors. I've recently added a puppy food puzzle to feeding my Eastern Indigo. That's awesome. They're really good at food puzzles. He's struggling with figuring out the puzzle. How can I evaluate how much struggling with it is okay and how much is too much? When you first introduce food puzzles to your snake or any animal, you want to make it super easy at first. So I don't know what type of food puzzle you have, but I would leave all of the wells open the first time you let the snake interact with it, and just put the food right on top of it. So they don't have to open anything. They just go to the food puzzle and the food's laying on top of it and they find it. And then next time, maybe open lids or open containers and leave them open. Put the food in the containers and let the snake find it. And then partially close the container. So if this is the lid, instead of shutting it all the way and the snake has to find a way to get in, you prop it open a little bit and put the food underneath. And you gradually make it a little bit more difficult until the snake's gaining confidence and gaining skill with that puzzle. And then you can hide everything 100% and close everything all the way and let the snakes struggle to get in it. Our bull snake, Rodney, sometimes will struggle for several minutes or even up to an hour to get into some of the more difficult puzzles. But remember that she has been doing this for several years. I just didn't give her a really tough puzzle and say, find your food, have fun. I worked her up from very, very simplistic puzzle interactions to more difficult ones. All right. Oh my gosh, I'm getting so many questions. And I did set a timer because I have another appointment right after this. And Mac Lorenzo, thank you so much for your super chat. Any money that comes into my channel on super chats, YouTube, through Patreon goes 100% to the animals. I am retired from the city of Colorado Springs, and 100% of my retirement goes to the animals. I have nothing left every month once I buy animal food and pay our electric bill. So I pay our electric bill and I buy all the feeders for the snakes, all of the cat and dog food and all of their treats, and I pay for all of the veterinary bills. And then, bless his heart, my husband, with his full-time job, supports our nonprofit 501c3 animal sanctuary because we don't get enough donations to support it. So his salary supports the animal sanctuary and buys all of the horse feed and buys all of our groceries and pays our house payments. So thank you so much for anybody that's on our Patreon community or that does the super chats. I really, the animals appreciate it, although they don't understand it. Believe me, if they understood what was happening, they would appreciate it. Okay. Scrub pythons, very cool. Those get really big. Okay, I just saw, man, the questions are coming in pretty quick. I did see one pop up that said, any suggestions on a retic who is pushing? Any advice for a retic who is pushing? She's 3 and we try to keep husbandry correct. Could it be fertility related, and what can we do for that? I know that my super dwarf retic wants out all the time, and that's why he pushes. He doesn't push when he's content in his enclosure, if he's basking or if he's in blue or if he's resting or swimming. He pushes when he wants out, and I have to actually lock his enclosure or he gets out. And sometimes I open the door and he only comes out a few feet and he finds some place to rest just right outside of his enclosure. So his goal directed behavior, so pushing is a goal directed behavior. Usually he does it because he wants out. He wants the door open, and once I open the door, he calms down. And sometimes he doesn't even go very far. He just sits at the threshold or he sits outside the door. Sometimes he does travel far and finds another place in the house to sit, but he does it because he wants out. Some snakes may be pushing because of they've developed a stereotypy, and those are behaviors that develop because they have a motivation to perform a behavior that they are unable to perform inside of their enclosure, because the thing they want to do isn't available in the enclosure or whatever. And so they do this pushing behavior instead as an outlet for not being able to do the actual behavior that they want to do. So you have to kind of try to figure out what's motivating the behavior. All behavior has a function. And so what's motivating the pushing behavior? And I experiment with finding that out by usually, if they're pushing on the door, just opening the door and then stepping back and observing what happens. If I open the door and they turn around and go back inside their enclosure and sit or hide and they don't come out and they leave the door, then I know it wasn't because they wanted out and it's some other reason. But if they come out, then the pushing behavior is usually because they want out. And of course, right off the bat, which I think you already said, you have to make sure that the temperature didn't get out of whack. It's like 200 degrees in there, and that's why they're pushing or something like that. But given that the environment and the climatic conditions are correct, you have to sort of test out the motivation behind the pushing. I usually just open the door and see what happens and then try to figure it out from there. I've heard that glass surfing and rubbing can be a problem. So glass surfing and rubbing, again, is usually motivated by the inability to perform a behavior within the enclosure that they want to perform and can't, or is motivated by conditions within the enclosure that are unacceptable to them and they're trying to get away from them, or motivated by the fact that they just want out. Now remember that these are wild animals and we are keeping them captive. As much as we want to make their enclosures nice, as much choice and control as we give them, they're still under captive management, and it's not a natural state of being to be captive and not have agency over where you go and what you do and the decisions you make about your own location. So sometimes the glass surfing is a stereotypy to get rid of energy that's built up because of the inability to perform other natural behaviors, and sometimes it's done because they want that door open. They want the glass open and they want the ability to come out if they choose. You'll notice some snakes, when you open the door, will stay right around the threshold, and you think, well, I opened the door and now you're not even coming out. But remember, there's a huge difference between not being able to come out and having the option to come out but choosing not to come out. That's really, really a big motivator for all organisms, for people, for animals, and yes, your reptiles too. How has my opinion evolved with ball pythons now from initially not having interests? Okay, I just noticed a fuse blew. I'm going to run really quick and fix that because otherwise I'm going to lose internet connection. I will be right back. Good boy, Monroe. We're out here about an hour east of Colorado Springs on a 35-acre ranch. We have really poor broadband, internet, cell service, and we have issues a lot with our electricity, running all of the snake lamps and heaters, running all of the tank heaters for the horses during the winter. We oftentimes have issues. My opinion of royal pythons has changed since I got the initial two. And the initial two royal pythons that I got, a Moon and Amonette, that's my 5-minute warning already. I'm going to try to answer these super fast. A Moon and Amonette, I think, are typical royal pythons that probably the most average pet owner ends up with. And that is, I got them when they were several months old and had come from living at large-scale breeders in the tub system. And I put them in an enclosure, and those two I just kind of left alone and observed their behavior. And they're not like highly fearful, but they're not interactive. So they sleep all day in a hide. They come out at night and move to the other side of their enclosure. They climb and move around a little bit, and then they get into an ambush position, either up high in a tree type log or in their cave and stick their head out. And then if they're not hungry or hunting, they just move from their daytime hide and sit on top of a ledge or sit inside their cave all night, awake and looking out, and then they go back to their daytime hide during the day. Amonette, the female, took about 18 months to acclimate to coming out of her enclosure through choice-based handling and being okay with me handling her and interacting with her and exploring the room. And we're now about 2 years into it, and Moon is still not doing that. He's still fearful of me handling him and touching him, and I think that's probably typical. What I am finding, and I'm really excited about, is if the royal pythons arrive here at just a few weeks old and they're exposed to environmental stimulation and training from that early age, they're turning out really awesome. Like Sarek and Feather and some of the others, they asked to come out most nights of the week. They are excelling at target training. I just posted Phoenix doing a target training session on Instagram yesterday or the day before, where you can tell immediately when she realizes the target's there, she just moves right towards it and takes her food. And they're just amazing with their personalities if they're raised with environmental stimulation and complexity and slowly acclimated to what life is going to be like with a family and the chaos of living in a home. Unfortunately, when they live in a breeder rack and they're only exposed to a tub for most of their juvenile life or even into adulthood, and then they go to a family, they have a huge amount of difficulty adjusting because all they ever knew was that tub. And now they're thrown into a family situation where people want to handle them and look at them and take them out, and where there's all of this chaos, kids, people, other pets, TVs, stereos, stuff in the house, and they just have no clue what that's about, and it's extremely frightening to them. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap up. Let me see real quick. Man, I can't believe how quick 30 minutes goes by. I was wondering if you had started the program for the snake to push a ball in a basket. Oh, you know what? I had a corn snake that I was teaching to push a ball into a basket. And I was doing that for the Karen Pryor Academy Live from the Ranch Training Challenge that Ken Ramirez was hosting every week during the pandemic when it first started. So that was a challenge that he put out for people to teach their animal to put something in a basket. So I took up the challenge with the snake, and I was teaching the snake to push a ball in a basket. And that snake has since passed away. He was an older corn snake, and he passed away last year. And I haven't started teaching that behavior to any other snakes, but you guys keep reminding me because that was sort of a fun behavior to do. And it wasn't that difficult to teach him that. He learned it pretty quickly. And speaking of corn snakes, I did want to let you know that when we hit the 1-year mark for our Thursday Royals at the Ranch series, I'm going to move the Python Regis just into our general videos that we do, the Serpente Sundays and the Training Tuesday videos with all the other species. And I'm going to start a corn snake series on Thursday nights. And so that'll be, I think our last Royals at the Ranch episode as a dedicated episode will be June 23rd. And then after that, we'll start a series on corn snakes every Thursday, doing the same type of thing because corn snakes are the second most kept pet snake species in the world. It doesn't mean I'm not still going to work with Royals. I am doing a bunch with the Python Regis, lots of experiments in behavior and how to best help them adapt to living with families. That's not going to change. I'll just roll that into the other videos that I'm doing. And then our Thursday segment will move into corn snakes every week. So hopefully some of you are happy about that. Those of you who love corn snakes. Yes, my phone has Doctor Who on it. I'm a huge science fiction fan, including Doctor Who. So my phone alarm was the Doctor Who theme. If you have any more questions, you can put them on that community tab. And I will either answer them in the comments or I'll make a video about them if it's something that I can make a whole video about. And I'm just really quick racing through to make sure I didn't miss anything. Somebody mentioned, oh, Natalia mentioned she liked a mix of natural and man-made items. And I really like that too. I tend to do that. I tend to put naturalistic stuff in there, like real substrates and some real branches and rocks mixed with PVC and plastic and synthetic materials. I just want to make sure the snakes have stuff to do and they're able to perform natural behaviors. And I don't necessarily worry so much if the leaves are real or fake. But I do have a mixture of both. I have some real plants and some enclosures, and I'm not great with plants. And they don't last very long, unfortunately. So I think I got all of your questions. I really appreciate you guys being here. I'll do this again next month. And again, I have another appointment with a client in 25 minutes. So I have to run. If you guys are interested in group live chats, our Patreon community at just $5 a month, the basic level, we have 2 group live chats every month where everybody can get together and ask me questions and chat. And then at different tiers, I have private sessions for 30 minutes where we meet one-on-one and you can ask me questions or I can coach you as you train your animal. And that's what I actually do for a profession. I have several clients with dogs and snakes and horses, and we meet, we make an appointment, they train their animal right in front of me, and I coach them from here. And they don't have to go to a dog training center and be in a group class. I'm able to coach them from my home, and they work with their dog right in their home. Or they get a bunch of their friends together and they have a little group dog class, and I just coach them via Zoom. So if you're interested in more things like that, check out our Patreon community. You're always welcome to ask me questions on Facebook, Instagram, here in the YouTube comments. And then I will do another office hours sometime next month, but we need to keep it short because I'm usually fitting it in around other appointments. Thank you guys so much, and I will talk with everyone soon, either in a live chat or through a video. Until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.